Hey there, this is Andy Grider, host and producer for Unique This Week. A production is unique of Uniqueness is Power. And with us this week, we have Katie Borchers, who is a former bedside nurse, still a practicing RN as need be, and somebody who has worked for the University of Rochester right up until COVID, when her life took a complete change of direction, and she's gotten herself into something that is very unique, very different, and very uplifting, actually, in an industry that doesn't usually have those things associated with it. We're going to talk about debt collection today, folks, and we're going to talk about it from an empathetic and compassionate level. I know you may clean the wax out of your ears because that doesn't sound right, but that's what we're going to do today. Katie, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for that great introduction.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. It's absolute pleasure. It's been so much fun getting to know you over about the last year and a bit. It's always been enlightening when I speak with you, because almost every time I talk to you, I learn more about the realm of debt collection. But when we first started talking, what really blew me away was what you and Chris have built with Beyond Green, and the sort of ethos and the high touch behind it. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of what kind of prompted that and how you saw this niche?
Yeah. I mean, you don't know any nurses that own debt collection agencies?
One, I'm talking to.
Yeah. So the only nurse-owned debt collection agency, and here's the kind of story that happened. You know, I had 18 years in healthcare. I spent a lot of time at the bedside. I was a pediatric nurse. I spent a lot of time in technology, working in electronic health records, working with C-suite executives to help them implement the best healthcare system to support their staff. And when I was ready to try something new, I partnered up with somebody who's been in the debt collection world for almost 20 years and really saw a gap. And so coming in for Beyond Green Solutions, we tried to fill that gap. And what's really happening in the industry is they've been around a long time. I think debt collection is one of the oldest industries. And there is an old school way, if you will, of approaching that account. So much so that rules and regulations are changing drastically to try to meet the needs of our society and culture. And so our belief is that when you use empathy, right, treating people with respect, asking open-ended questions, but even going beyond that, giving them lots of options, it brings a better conversation. You establish that rapport, which establishes, an open communication and collaboration. The other thing is technology. And we're not talking technology living on the bleeding edge. It's not what people want. What people want is options, and options for how you communicate with them, options for how they can make payments. And then most importantly, our clients want options to see our work transparently, right? Trust has to be earned both with the consumer or the patient, the borrower, whomever that is that owes money. But trust has to be earned with our clients. They are handing over their customers to us, and we are an extension of their team. And so that transparency and technology is important. And then there's this one other thing that we call it the trifecta of our secret sauce. And I don't know what else to call it other than active collections. We are making phone calls, doing some sort of outreach, whether it's with technology or just old school pick up the phone, about once every other week. And so we are not doing what you would traditionally see, which is sending a letter, reporting to a credit bureau, and then waiting and seeing what happens. One, it's because we think that secret sauce works better. Two, there's changing rules and regulations and how people feel about the experience of customer service. For many years, we've heard healthcare talk about the patient experience. Well, the patient experience doesn't just end when you leave your doctor's office or you leave the hospital visit. Right. It ends all the way to the end of that encounter and claim closing. And as a debt collector, we're the very end of that. And we want to fulfill that great patient experience to the end. And we can do that through that customer service, through that empathy and collections. And we can do that, to be quite honest, without those harsher methods that you've seen in the past.
Right. I was going to say, I think most people associate debt collection with high pressure, leverage, threats, etc. And so completely different from what you do. What is the reaction of the client slash customer when you are dealing with them? I mean, can you share a little bit of how
Yeah.
it differs versus what might normally happen? Are they surprised?
Yeah.
Are they
No,
both?
that's great. So, our clients, they're very surprised. They're surprised to hear about my background. They're surprised to hear about our approach. It's certainly not what they think of when they're searching for a collection agency. I think a lot of businesses, revenue cycle directors, finance officers, CFOs, they see debt collection as this necessary evil. They're like, I'll pick this one, right? And it is what it is. I get stuck with what I get stuck with. And so we have a lot of great conversations with our clients. From a consumer or a patient, somebody who's on that other end that owes that money, there is certainly a pleasant surprise when they are, treated with a smile behind that phone line. People say all the time, right? I can hear your smile over the phone. And I think that's true in collections. Also, that patience that we bring, that accommodation, there's this kind of backwards feeling. If you don't push, they won't pay. But really, when you push them away. And so giving that patience, that grace, that kindness, it actually brings them closer to you. Now, it doesn't mean that we, roll over like, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me, make this, whatever, a zero for you. You still have to be firm. You are still requesting money, but it can be done so in a way that makes people feel like they've won, right? They got that monkey off their back that is that debt. And then our clients are getting that recovery money without damaging that customer service experience or, their, public relations stature. And then, of course, my company is also winning in that, right? We're recovering those dollars and we're all sharing in that success.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. And I hesitate to ask a question because I don't know if it's something you want to put out there exactly, but I'll ask. And if you tell me we need to defer, we need to defer. How do you compare to the other groups as far as rate of collection?
Oh, there's so many things that go into what you're terming recovery rate, right? How soon do we get that past due? Certainly, if you gave me a past due from 3 months ago, it's going to go better than 3 years ago. What type of population did it come from? What kind of, in my industry, they call it propensity to pay, right? What is the likelihood that this person is going to pay? So certainly that is varied. From my experience and from my research, industry average is we're doing about double to triple the industry average. Now, could that mean that all of my clients have really happy patients that are willing to pay and they send it to me in 3 months? Well, wouldn't that be great? But no, it's that trifecta of respect, empathy, and collections, frequent communication, and using great technology to communicate and find people. So, I mean, I don't ever make promises, but absolutely, we see ourselves doing better than the industry average of 12%.
Right. Well, and if you're at 24 to 36 off of something they weren't going to collect on anyway, it's a really big. I mean, that's
it is. Yeah, it's that needed cash flow. And what I hear from offices, they do say that, well, something's better than nothing. And I'm like, okay, is that how you're justifying me? But the other thing that I'm hearing them saying is we've tried everything and we're at a loss, whether we feel taken advantage of, or it's not our skill set, our staff don't want to do it, or we can't do it. We're strapped doing other things. Regardless, they're reaching out to us to be an extension of their team. And that's really how we want to treat their patients, as if we are one of those team members. And people, they have this very weird feeling about what is debt collection. And there's lots of different kinds of debt collectors. We are not purchasing the debt from those doctors' offices, those physician practices, those hospitals, even our non-healthcare clients. That's their receivable. That's their patient. That's their customer. That's their consumer. We are assisting with the revenue cycle.
Right. Now that makes all the sense in the world. Now, we've talked about the fact that you do medical, and we'll talk about some of the other things you do as well in just a minute. Mm-hmm. But sticking on the medical side, one of the most interesting things that I heard you say in one of our last conversations was around, as you mentioned earlier, the changing legislation to help protect the consumer, help protect the medical debt holder. There's a lot of things going on there. Can you give an update to folks that might be listening to this?
Yeah, sure is. And in an industry like debt collection, we are highly regulated, both on the federal front, many state fronts, and even some city municipalities. And it is very important to stay on top of those rules and regulations and to use technology to help you abide by them. But here are some of the things that are changing when it comes to debt collection. There was some new rules and regulations about a year and a half ago that basically gave definition more so than ever to what is considered harassment. How often you are allowed to call, what you are required to say, information that you have to share, when you have to stop with your efforts and pause and do something else, who is the right party, right? The right person you can speak to and who you can't. Our industry is told what all of those things are, but even more so in the medical side, the regulations are getting tighter. Back in March of 2023, there was a new credit bureau workflow, and that medical debt that is $500 or less cannot be reported to a credit bureau. And now a lot of us think, well, that's great. These poor patients, they're having an unplanned financial stressor. But our side of the fence says, well, you are decreasing, dare I say, corroding the ability for medical offices to stay in business. And so as those medical conditions and rules and regulations for collections change, my industry has to find a way to still bring in that cash flow, bring in that recovery for our clients. And so medical debt that is $500 or less is no longer reported to the credit bureau. And some of my peers are really stressing about that because that is their bread and butter workflow. Here at Beyond Green Solutions, we aren't using that workflow. We're finding that we're giving our clients the recovery rate above what they would expect by using empathy, technology, frequent communication. But it is one of those things that is ever changing. As a matter of fact, here in New York State, some new legislation was just brought up. It hasn't passed completely yet, but it's saying that all medical debt cannot be reported to the credit bureaus. On top of that, we already have rules and regulations that judgments cannot be garnished through your employer for your medical debt, and you cannot put a lien on your primary property for your medical debt. And so what does all of this mean? It means a few different things. It means it's harder, right? You have less tools in your toolkit to recover that money. But it also means that those of us who are using other methods are starting to rise because that's the only way of the future is to use this empathy in collections. And so I always challenge people, right? When you're asking for collection services, you're kind of making those phone calls, you're Googling, you want to ask those kinds of questions. I always get asked, how much do you cost? Well, yeah, that's important. How much are my services? It impacts your bottom line. But even more so, it's what is your recovery and what are your methods? And so those are three important questions. How much do you cost? What is your recovery? And what are your methods? And maybe even more so, how do you stay on top of those rules and regulations? Nobody else follows them but debt collectors. So make sure the collection agency you chose is following it.
I was going to say, it's always hard for a business when they lose. First of all, as you mentioned, it's an old industry. Secondly, this is an old playbook, and they just lost page 1 of their playbook. And in New York, they lost pages 1 and 2 and 3 of their playbook.
Right.
So it's where you're at is sort of the catbird seat. And so when you are talking with people, what would be the most common myth or most common misunderstanding that people have about debt collection, whether it's in medical or otherwise, because we want to jump to the other side of things too, just to talk about what you do there. But let's talk about what it looks like, when you're talking to a prospect or, even a current client, where you come back and say, I've still got a question here. What are the most common misconceptions about debt collection?
When I am speaking to potential clients, hands down, the misperception is, how the process works, that there are people out there like me that are not using harsh methods and they work. When people find out that I'm a nurse, when I use the word empathetic debt collection, there is definitely this lack of understanding that that method is out there, and there's certainly a lack of understanding that that method works. So yeah, I would say, yeah, just explaining to people who I am, where I come from, how I do things, and why I do things that way. Yeah, I tell my story. I talk more about being a nurse than anything else.
I was going to say, let's go to the why. Why did you choose to do this?
Oh, lots of reasons. I mean, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, always wanted to own my own business, was raised by entrepreneurs. Certainly, loved healthcare, thought I would be there forever, learned so much. But then I realized I had learned so much and I wanted to learn more. I wanted to do something different. I had sat at the bedside side of healthcare, and then I sat at the IT side of healthcare, and I was ready to sit at another side of healthcare. And in this case, that, extension, that finance side, I really was intrigued by hearing about the industry of collections and was convinced that I could stand on this soapbox and say it and do it and make it different. I love to surprise people. I love to tell people I'm a debt collector and see what happens to their face. I always lead with, I'm a nurse. I was at the bedside. I've been in healthcare for 20 years. And then I own my own business. And I'm like, oh, what kind of business? They assume I'm doing, I don't know, visiting nurse, consulting for healthcare, technology. And then when I spit out, well, I own a collection agency. I don't know. I think it's just hilarious. And then, of course, I always say, well, I'm the only nurse-owned collection agency in the US. So it's not a common career path.
No, it's not, but it's a brilliant one because you've done a really amazing job. Now, you've worked personally in healthcare. You focus a lot on healthcare within the company. What other areas do you work in? Are there other specialties you have, other niches you like to work in?
Yeah, believe it or not, empathy and collections works outside of healthcare as well. We have two other portfolios, if you will, that we work with. We can do commercial collections or B2B, where the people who owe our clients receivables are other businesses. And we do that, all over the United States. And then we have a lot of what I would call skilled trades. So think HVAC, plumbing, construction, pest control, landscaping, services that come into your home and provide a service or a repair, something like that. We have a lot of receivables in that area. And I've really decided that the reason is because the people who are coming into your home to do that work are really skilled at that work. They are not skilled in asking for payment. And so if payment doesn't come easy from that consumer, they abandon that conversation. They like, well, I don't have my credit card here. Can you bill me? Sure. Yeah, but we'll bill you, right? So yeah, a lot of skill trade.
Okay, very cool. The last question, I know there's a lot of new things. You've mentioned, change is inherent right now, but there's also change within what you and Chris are doing, as far as expansion of services and things like that. Is there anything you want to mention here at the end of the interview to tell people about what's new, what's coming?
You're so sweet to give me that opportunity. So what we have found is we are the experts in conversations, and we can move those conversations with patients out of third-party collections and into first-party collections. So wouldn't it be great if you got a courtesy call from your doctor's office after 3 statements have been sent to say, hey, Andy, this is Katie calling from Dr. Smith's office about your outstanding bill. Instead of not having the time or not having the skill set to reach out to you and sending it off to collections as the next step. And so we are starting to do what you would refer to as first party. Some people call it early out or extended business office, moving up the revenue cycle into pre-debt collection phone calls. And then, I think the revenue cycle has a lot of opportunities for improvement. And we certainly would like to continue to move up that revenue cycle. And we have plans to do the kind of first part of healthcare billing, and that's the insurance, the payer side of that, submitting claims to those insurance companies. So more to come on that, but certainly there is so much opportunity and room for improvement in healthcare billing. And I love to be the person who's bringing a different perspective, because I wasn't raised in healthcare billing. I was raised on the bedside portion of it. So that's a great opportunity for me in the future.
I was going to say it's a really cool circular journey here of sorts. You're seeing every aspect really more than most people ever will in healthcare. So
yes.
if somebody wanted to get hold of you and wanted to talk about this, I can't see why they wouldn't, but how do they what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, please call me, email me, send me a, carrier pigeon. We have a website. It is beyondgreensolutions.com. It's pretty easy. Our number is posted there. There is an online form submission. Of course, Katie Borchers is on LinkedIn, as is Beyond Green Solutions. But, feel free to just reach out for a conversation and advice. I give out a lot of free advice. It is a scary industry, and people are really fearful to ask questions about it. There are many things that you can do to not need me, right? You don't want to send your patients or your clients to collections. Ask me for some help, because at the end of the day, you want to feel like those that you did send off to collections, you did everything you possibly could do, and that I was the next natural step in that process. So yeah, that's more than what you asked.
I was going to say, even when you're a kind collector, you don't want to go there, but especially if you're not. And I think that's the other misconception a lot of people do have, is that debt collection has to be ugly. And it's a rough and tumble, and you do such a nice job of not doing that, Katie. Thank you for being here today. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, I'm always thrilled to have guests that make us look good. And once again, we've had another person here with us today who has really kind of turned an industry on its head. The only nurse-owned debt collection agency in the country, working in healthcare in large part, but also, as Katie mentioned, in skilled trades, other areas like that. There is a lot of room for empathy and compassion in today's world. And whether it's generationally speaking, or whether it's consumers just being tired of bad customer service, or rude or pushy, or even threatening customer service, that's what it gets eliminated here. The one last thing I wanted to mention is that I've been super impressed with is Katie and Chris's ability to actually use technology, as she said, not to be cutting edge, bleeding edge, but actually to meet you where you are. And so make sure that your clients are met where they are, find the best ways to communicate with them and use those. Anytime you can double to triple what most people are returning, you should be making that phone call, finding out what's going on. And I will end by saying Katie has been an absolute fount of information with me, and I'm not even a prospect, but just in our talks and finding out more about it, it's just amazing the amount of knowledge she has. She understands the industry beautifully. Reach out, take the time. I'll be back next week with another guest. Unique This Week is a production of Uniqueness is Power. You can find us at uniquenessispower.com. Please feel free to take a look at what's up there on the YouTube channel. If there's anything that's going to help a friend, another fellow entrepreneur, anybody like that, please take these out and push them out to people you know. It's the biggest favor you can do. It's about a 20-minute episode usually. And always happy to make introductions for any of these folks as well. If you want to go through me, as Katie said, it's really easy to get hold of her as well. So again, thank you, Katie. Appreciate you.